We're in Pirkei Avot, first Perek, Mishnah 13. And Mishnah 13 continues Hillel's 3 Mishnayot. In Mishnah 12, we saw the first of Hillel's teachings, and in Mishnah 13, we're going to see the second one. And the second one is like this. It's a bit different. It's very interesting because this is actually in Aramaic. So we'll go with the translation of Sefaria. Different Pirushim have different explanations for what this means. We'll try to see as much as we can while still going into some depth in the commentaries. So here's what it says. Hu haya omer, right? This is Hillel speaking. So Hillel haya omer. So Nagad Shma, Aved Shmei. Right? He used to say, one who makes his name great causes his name to be destroyed. Udala Mosif, Yasef, and a person who does not add on to his knowledge, i.e. his Torah knowledge, then his knowledge will cease. Udala Yalif, Ketala Chayev, and a person who does not learn, the Yalif does not learn, Ketala Chayev, he's deserving of death. Udi Ishtamish Betaga Chalav. The person who uses the taga, so Teimanim will call their tikkun, right? The way they learn how to read from the Torah, they call it a taj. So that's from Keter, right? Keter Torah, taj. So Idishamish betaga, a person who uses the taga, the crown of Torah, who makes unworthy, undeserving use of Torah, inappropriate use of Torah, chalef, he'll pass away. Okay, so what does this mean? And of course, the very first question we have to ask is, why is this in Aramaic? As a general principle, Mishnayot are in Hebrew. It's the Gemara that really goes into Aramaic, but not the Mishnayot. You'll see, as a very strong principle, when you're learning Mishnah, it'll always be in Hebrew. So why is this in Aramaic? Well, why the change? And so there are Pirushim, including the Hon Ashir and the Yachin, who say that it's because this is such an important mission. These principles are so critical that we made sure to put in a language that everyone will understand. This idea of don't go pursuing kavod, right? Be an anav, be a humble person. You need to keep learning. We have an obligation to teach. Making inappropriate use of the Torah is inappropriate. So that's the kind of the basic layer. Now going into like each one of these features, well, what's going on here? And so the Yachin is the one who's going to be, for the most part, explaining what's going on. So what does that first word, negad or naged, shma mean? So what he says it means to elongate, aggrandize. And what happens when a person wants to aggrandize his name, a person wants to elongate his name, become well-known, famous. So what happens is, so Aved Shmei, he loses the name he already has. It's very interesting. There are two things that point this out. First, it goes from Shema, like the person who wants a name, some name out there in the ether, will lose his name, right? And this is actually articulated in a different Gemara in Eruvin. Chazal tell us, Kol harodef achar hakavod, hakavod boreach mimeno. Anyone who chases after kavod, kavod escapes him. It runs away from him. Now, what's interesting is, if I would have learned that, the way I initially would have thought of that, my havamina would have been, you're chasing after a goal, and the goal just keeps. It's just too quick for you. It's always out of your reach. But that's actually not the way the Yachin is learning this. He says that's actually not the message. The message is, just as a person has assets, or a person has his own kavod, his own name that hopefully is a good name. As he chases after this kind of this fiction, this desire to be really famous, truly big, a really like well-known famous person, then it's not that he just doesn't get that. It's that he loses what he already has. That's why it says, Negad Shema, a person who goes after some name, Aved Shmei, his own name gets lost. And moreover, it says Aved Shmei, that gets lost, it gets destroyed. A person can lose or destroy something he doesn't have. So it's first from the fact that it says Shmei, his, right, his name, and Aved means he loses, he destroys it. In the pursuit of kavod, that person always loses. Not only does he not get this unattainable goal, but what he already has just disappears. And perhaps a good analogy for this, just to imagine what this looks like, is if a person goes to the casino, right? He comes with $1,000, and he's pursuing the jackpot. He wants to make $1 million, but the thing is he has to pay $100 for every hand he plays. So what happens is, if we say, the jackpot keeps escaping from him, it's not that it escapes. I mean, the jackpot never belonged to him, and he never really had a realistic way of getting it. But if a person keeps paying that $100 to try to get it, then every hand he plays, he loses more and more. That's what Negad Shema, person who keeps chasing after this goal, Aved Shmei, his own name, it just fleets. It gets destroyed, it gets lost. And Yachin continues and has some pretty harsh words to say about this individual. He says, if people outwardly respect this person, their esteem will still be there, right? They'll just laugh at him behind his back, and even the heavens will rebel against him. Pretty strong. And as a final thought here, he says, even if a person has a good neshama, right, he's doing good things, he's a praiseworthy individual otherwise, right? What that like is like a golden nose ring, right? Gold, that's good, that's high quality. It's like it's in the nose of a pig. You lose what you've gained. That is to say, it's beautiful to have this golden ring, but just look at where it is. Just it's totally unsavory. You're no longer impressed by the gold. You're so focused on what it's attached to. Strong words. And he goes on, and then he says, and then he goes on with Udlo Mosif Yasef, right? A person who does not add on to his Torah knowledge, it'll just disappear. And he explains, like, well, why don't people want to increase their Torah knowledge? That sounds great, to learn some more. He says there are three reasons. First, because he thinks he knows everything, right? I mean, that's a pretty common. What's there to learn? If I know everything. Second is all his teachers are lowly, they're unfitting, they're not worthy of teaching him. And then third, and this might be very real to some of us, is they're afraid to learn because he's afraid that people will see his foolishness. What happens is it's kind of funny. The more a person tries to learn, they have to kind of put themselves out there and show that they don't really know anything, right? When a person is learning a trade, right, if he has a couple years experience, then he can show what he knows, and then eventually his lack of knowledge will be exposed, and he'll get to learn some more. But of course, he has to kind of make himself vulnerable in that way, and he's not interested in doing this. He's like, I'm not learning from anybody, because there's an aspect of embarrassment there. Okay, and then next one is Udlo Yalef Katal Chayev, right? A person who does not learn at all is Chayev for death. A person who does not, right? So there are two ways of understanding this. Either a person who does not learn is is chayav death, or there's also another way of saying this, udlo yalef, which means a person who does not teach is chayav death. Now, why is that? What does that mean? And why would a person not want to teach? I mean, that's great. You'll be able to get to show off. That sounds like the prime way of increasing your own prestige. So there are a couple of reasons. Again, a person who is only concerned about their own image, because they'll be worried that his Talmidim will eventually know as much as he does. It's very impressive for a person to be the smartest guy in the room. But if he starts sharing his wisdom and people start to know more than him, then that special status might disappear. And of course, alternatively, says the Yachin, it's also possible that he just sees these Talmidim, they're just too lowly. He doesn't take them too seriously, and he's like, forget it. And those are some comments. But then he moves on and he says, and this, again, it's a very similar theme. He says, such a person's actions are in fact of a righteous nature, right? A person is acting properly, even if he has good deeds, again, but if it's to become proud in the eyes of others, or if it's for other people to respect him, so it'll just blow away in the wind. It'll just be like Afer ve'efer. He just gets nothing, and not Afer ve'efer in the good way. It's in the bad ways, and he just becomes this insubstantial nothing. Okay, so that's the Yachin. But there's another perush which is worth citing, and that's a Yein Levanon. He takes a bit of a different tack. He says, why is it that this Mishnah is in Aramaic? So again, the way the Teimanim will say Aramaic, and also the way it's often pronounced, is not only onkelos, right? The translation of the Torah is not onkelos. It's the Targum, right? The translation of the Torah in Aramaic. But the Targum isn't simply a translation. It's actually also a commentary. If we look at the end of Sefer Bereshit, when Yaakov Avinu is giving the brachas to his children, the Targum there is actually very long. It goes on at length. It's actually commenting on what's going on. It's fleshing out what's happening. I heard ArtScroll just recently released the entire Targum, all of Onkelos, translated to be able to go through it. And I'm assuming, presumably, because there's what to say. The Targum isn't simply a translation. It's also a commentary. So what's a commentary on? Says the Yein Levanon, it's on a commentary on Hillel's previous Mishnah. And we'll see just one instance of this. That's, I think, all we have time for. This is like this. So Hillel Shami Kiblu Meham, right? Hillel Omer. Hevemi Talmidav Shel Aaron. So says the Yein Levanon, I mean, like, why the Talmid of Shel Aaron? Why can't we just go straight to the source? Why not be like Aaron? Right? So what's the why the Talmidim? Why are we kind of cutting it halfway? Don't go the full way. Hit Aaron himself. And moreover, how is this a commentary on the first thing we've seen? That's to say, Hoyomer, Nagit Shma Avot Shmei, a person who tries to elongate, aggrandize his name, will end up losing all of his kavod. So how does the Yein Levanon understand that? And he offers a really something special, and he says like this. He says that because these people, again, they're learning Torah well, they're doing with some good intent, but ultimately it's really to become known as great rabbis. They really want to be known like, wow, this guy is such a chacham, such deep divrei Torah, and that desire for fame is not good, no good. So how do we prevent that? How do we stop this from happening? So the best way to avoid that is actually to learn from the Talmidim of Aaron. Now, why is that? To be like the Talmidim of Aaron. Why? Because Aaron, amazingly, was actually happy for his younger brother Moshe, who became the leader and the ultimate Torah teacher. And ultimately, actually, Moshe taught Aaron, and Aaron had to learn from Moshe, his younger brother. And so the Talmidim, who saw this from their own Rebbe, right, they look at their Rebbe and they see Aaron was the older brother. And moreover, he was more well known to the Jewish people at the time. Moshe was kind of like a stranger. I mean, he had been gone for decades. Aaron was the one who was taking care of them. And then Moshe comes into the scene, and Aaron has to be taught by Moshe, his younger brother, and he's happy about this. A Talmud who sees that in his Rebbe can't possibly learn Torah for their own sake. They see their Rebbe, they think of themselves, and they're like, we need to learn Torah Lishma. Look at Aaron. Look at how he learned from his younger brother Moshe. If he can do that, then that's the kind of message that I can internalize. And in that way, you avoid Negad Shma Aved Shmei. We'll leave it there, and we'll see you next time.